I'm Giselle Johnson, and I never thought I'd be the kind of person to get blindsided by a divorce demand in my own living room, holding back tears while my husband waved papers in my face like a victory flag. I'm 42, a sales manager for a tech company in Atlanta, Georgia, where the humid air and oak-lined streets make everything feel heavier than it should. My life wasn't always this chaotic. I used to think I had it figured out. Decent job, nice savings, a heart that still hoped for something real. But that morning, when Ryan, my husband, looked at me with a smirk and said, "I don't need you anymore," it felt like the ground caved in, and it wasn't just the divorce that hit me like a freight train. It was what he said next. "Dad's bank account has $500 million, Giselle. I'm set for life. You were just the ATM until I got it." My stomach churned. I'd seen hints of Ryan's selfishness before. Little things, like how he'd dodge chores or flash a grin to get his way. But this was a whole new level of cold. He'd married me, played the part of a caring husband, all while waiting for his father to die so he could cash in. And the worst part? He was dragging my father-in-law's name through the mud, a man who'd been nothing but kind to me. I stood there, fists clenched, fighting the urge to scream. My father-in-law had passed away just days ago, and I was still raw, grieving a man who'd treated me like family. Ryan's words felt like a betrayal of both of us. I wanted to lash out, to tell him exactly what I thought of his greedy, spineless plan. But something stopped me, a quiet voice in my head, maybe my father-in-law's, saying, "Stay calm, Giselle." So I took a deep breath, snatched the divorce papers from his hand, and signed them right there. "Fine," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "File them yourself. Send my stuff when you're done." I walked out of that big Atlanta house, past the manicured lawn and the life I thought we'd built, feeling a strange mix of anger and relief. Ryan thought he'd won, but he was about to learn the hard way. That $500 million he was banking on? It was a fantasy. And I knew it. Let me back up. To understand how I ended up here, you need to know where I started. I wasn't always this jaded. A few years ago, I was happily married to my first husband, a quiet guy who worked construction. We weren't rich, but we were content, saving up for a house in the Atlanta suburbs. Then one morning I got the call that changed everything. He'd been in a car accident on a job site. He didn't make it. The grief was like a weight I couldn't shake, heavy and relentless. Between life insurance and a severance package, I ended up with $500,000. It was more money than I'd ever seen, but it felt like blood money. My in-laws, sweet folks in their late 70s, told me to keep it. "We don't need it," they said. "You're young, Giselle. Use it to start over." I tried to share it with my brother-in-law and his wife, but they only took a small piece, insisting the rest was mine. There I was, 39, widowed, and sitting on a small fortune. I kept working, throwing myself into sales pitches and client meetings, but when I came home to my little apartment, the silence was deafening. I'd make coffee for 2 out of habit, then stare at the extra mug, feeling that ache in my chest. I wasn't broke, but I was broken. I needed someone to talk to, someone to make the world feel less empty. That's when Ryan Carter walked into my life. Ryan was a sales rep at a partner company, the kind of guy who could light up a room with a joke and a smile. He was 43, with a boyish charm that hid his rough edges. We'd cross paths at work events, trading small talk about clients or the latest tech trends. One day, over coffee at a conference, I let it all spill out. My husband's death, the loneliness, the way I felt like I was just going through the motions. Most people would have squirmed or changed the subject, but Ryan listened. He cracked a few lighthearted jokes, nothing mean, just enough to make me laugh for the first time in months. "Your husband was lucky to have you," he said, his eyes soft. "I'm terrible at relationships, Giselle. I get dumped faster than a bad Tinder date." He laughed, but there was a hint of truth in it. We started meeting up outside work, grabbing drinks at a dive bar in Midtown, talking about everything from music to our childhoods. Ryan grew up in Atlanta, in the shadow of his father, a big-shot real estate developer who'd made millions flipping properties across the Southeast. Ryan's mom left when he was young, chasing a lavish lifestyle his dad wouldn't fund. It left Ryan with a chip on his shoulder. always feeling like he had to prove himself, but never quite measuring up. I didn't see it then, but that insecurity drove a lot of what he did. Point one night, as we walked along the Beltline, he picked up a crumpled receipt I'd dropped and stuffed it into his already bulging wallet. "You're like a kid, Ryan," I teased, laughing as he fumbled with loose change. "Hey, I'm 43. Thank you very much," he shot back, grinning. That moment, small as it was, made me feel alive again. The hole in my heart didn't seem so big anymore. A year later, when Ryan confessed he had feelings for me, I hesitated. My first husband's memory still lingered, but I felt like he was telling me to move forward. So I said yes to dating Ryan, ignoring the whispers from friends who thought it was too fast. Then, one evening over dinner at a barbecue joint in Decatur, Ryan caught me off guard. "Giselle, we're not getting any younger. Why don't we just get married?" His eyes sparkled with that impulsive energy I'd come to love. I laughed, thinking he was joking, but he was serious. My gut told me to slow down, but Ryan's confidence was infectious. I thought maybe his carefree attitude could balance out my overthinking. "Okay," I said, surprising myself. "Let's do it." It wasn't until after I said yes that Ryan dropped another bombshell. "Oh, by the way, I'm living with my dad," he said casually, like he was mentioning the weather. "He's been sick, needs some help. You cool with that?" I froze. He had mentioned his dad before, not like this. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, my voice tight. "Didn't want to scare you off," he said with a shrug. "It's no big deal. Meet him and you'll see." I wasn't thrilled, but I agreed to meet his father, hoping it wouldn't change things. Little did I know that meeting would shape everything that came next. Walking up to Ryan's dad's house in suburban Atlanta felt like stepping into a different world. The place was big, 3 stories, red brick, with a wide lawn shaded by ancient oaks. But it wasn't flashy. It was the kind of home that screamed old money, practical but impressive. My stomach churned with nerves. I'd heard Ryan talk about his dad, a retired real estate developer who'd built half the strip malls in Georgia, but meeting him felt like a test I hadn't studied for. Ryan, as usual, was unfazed, swinging open the gate like he was strolling into a bar. "Relax, Giselle," he said, flashing that grin. "Dad's gonna love you." Inside, the house smelled like cedar and old books. Ryan's dad was waiting in a recliner, propped up with pillows, his face kind but tired. He wasn't bedridden, just frail, needing a hand to get around. "Sorry to meet you like this," he said, his voice warm despite the strain. "I'm not as spry as I used to be." I smiled, trying to hide my nerves. "No trouble at all," I said. "It's great to meet you." We hit it off instantly. He asked about my job, selling software solutions in a tech market that was shifting faster than I could keep up. "Tough business, with everyone going cloud-based," he said, his eyes sharp. "You focusing on integrations or new markets?" I blinked, surprised. Most people glazed over when I talk shop, but he got it. We dove into a conversation about market trends, and for a moment, I forgot I was meeting my future father-in-law. It was like talking to a mentor. Ryan, meanwhile, fiddled with his phone, clearly bored. "Dad's stingy," Ryan muttered later as we left. "Could have built a mansion, but no, we're stuck in this place." I frowned, glancing back at the house. It was bigger than anything I'd ever lived in. How could Ryan call it stingy? But I let it slide, too caught up in the warmth of his dad's welcome. When Ryan and I got married a few months later, we moved into his dad's house. It made sense, there was plenty of space, and his dad needed help. Ryan had a big idea. He'd quit his sales job to take care of his dad full-time. "I've been a lousy son," he said one night, his voice softer than usual. "Dad's done so much and I've done nothing. I want to step up, be the homemaker." I was skeptical. Ryan wasn't exactly Mr. Responsible. His wallet was still a mess of receipts and loose change, but I admired his heart. "You sure?" I asked. "You won't miss work?" He shook his head. "I'd regret not doing this more. I can always go back later." I nodded, hoping he meant it. My salary was enough for us, and his dad covered his own expenses, so I agreed to let Ryan handle the house AT first. It was great. I'd come home from long days pitching software to find Ryan cooking dinner. Nothing fancy, just burgers or pasta, but it felt like a home. His dad would share stories about his real estate days, like how he turned a rundown lot into a community center that's still standing in downtown Atlanta. He wasn't just a businessman. He cared about people, funding local charities and mentoring young entrepreneurs. I respected him more with every conversation, and he seemed to see me as more than just Ryan's wife. "You've got a good head on your shoulders, Giselle," he'd say. "Don't let my boy drag you down." But the cracks started showing fast. Ryan was diligent for maybe a month, vacuuming, grocery shopping, helping his dad with small tasks. Then he got sloppy. I'd find him sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone, while dishes piled up in the sink. "Dinner's handled," he'd say, pointing to a takeout bag on the counter. I'd bite my tongue, too tired from work to argue. His dad noticed too, his face tightening whenever Ryan slacked off. One day, he pulled me aside. "I'm sorry, Giselle," he said, his voice low. "I thought marriage would straighten him out. He's always been careless." I forced a smile. "It's fine," I lied, but inside, I was starting to see Ryan's true colors. Things got worse when I noticed money missing from my account. I'd given Ryan access for emergencies, thinking he'd be responsible. Big mistake. One afternoon, I came home to find a shiny vintage Mustang parked in the driveway. "Whose car is that?" I asked, my voice sharp. Ryan didn't look up from polishing a new set of golf clubs in the living room. "Mine," he said, like it was no big deal. "You got your fancy bathroom from Dad." I deserve something too. My jaw dropped. The bathroom wasn't my idea. His dad had overheard me mention a leaky faucet and turned it into a full renovation, complete with a walk-in shower to help him get around. It was practical, not a luxury, and it helped everyone in the house. Ryan's car? That was $30,000 of my money, gone without a word. I checked my bank account later that night. He'd spent nearly $50,000 in a month: car, golf clubs, designer clothes, you name it. I was furious, not just at the money, but at the entitlement. "You can't just take my savings, Ryan," I said, slamming the bank statement on the table. He shrugged. "Dad's loaded. Once he's gone, we'll be set." "What's the big deal?" I felt sick. He was already counting down to his dad's death, like it was just a matter of time before he hit the jackpot. I wanted to walk out right then, but I looked at his dad, frail but still so kind, and I couldn't leave him with Ryan. Not yet. Living with Ryan in that big Atlanta house started to feel like walking on eggshells. I'd come home from grueling days at the office, pitching software to clients who wanted miracles for pennies, and find Ryan glued to the couch, surrounded by empty takeout containers. The house, once warm and welcoming, felt like a battlefield. I'd cook, clean, and do laundry, all while Ryan claimed he was taking care of Dad. But I saw the truth. He'd hired a caregiver to handle his dad's needs, freeing him up to do nothing but spend my money. One evening, I snapped. "Ryan, what does homemaker mean to you?" I asked, pointing at the sink full of dishes. He rolled his eyes. "Relax, Giselle. I got Dad covered. You're always so uptight." Uptight? I was working 10-hour days to keep us afloat while he treated my bank account like his personal piggy bank. I checked my statements again, another $10,000 gone, this time on a high-end watch. I confronted him, my voice shaking with anger. "You're spending my savings like it's nothing. This stops now." He just smirked. "Dad listens to you, fixes up the house for you. Why can't I have a little fun? His money's coming our way soon enough." I felt a chill. He wasn't just careless. He was calculating, waiting for his dad to die so he could cash in. I took back my bank card that night, locking him out of my accounts. Ryan didn't even flinch. "Whatever," he said. "You'll see, Giselle. I'm gonna be set." His confidence made my skin crawl, but I didn't argue. I couldn't shake the image of his dad, who'd been nothing but generous, being reduced to a paycheck in Ryan's eyes. I thought about leaving, packing my bags and starting over, but every time I looked at my father-in-law, I stayed. He deserved better than being left with someone who saw him as a means to an end. My father-in-law, and I grew closer through it all. He'd call me into his study, a cozy room lined with photos of community centers and parks he'd helped build. "Giselle, you're too good for this," he'd say, his voice soft but firm. "I'm sorry Ryan's putting you through this." I'd brush it off, not wanting to burden him, but he'd insist on talking. One afternoon, he told me about his biggest project, a community center in East Atlanta he'd poured millions into, hoping to give kids a safe place to learn and play. "It didn't work out," he said, chuckling. "Lost a fortune. But I'd do it again. It was for something bigger than me." His eyes lit up when he talked about it, and I saw the man behind the money, a dreamer who cared about people, not just profits. He wasn't stingy, like Ryan claimed. He was careful, spending on things that mattered. When I mentioned our creaky back porch, he didn't just fix it. He had it rebuilt with a ramp for his wheelchair, plus new decking that made the whole yard feel like a retreat. "Makes it easier for me, and you get to enjoy it too," he said with a wink. Ryan, of course, saw it differently. "Why's Dad spending all this money on you?" he snapped one night, slamming a beer bottle on the counter. "I asked for a new TV, and he said no. But you get a whole damn porch." I tried to explain it was for his dad's mobility, but he stormed off, muttering about favoritism, and my father-in-law overheard and pulled me aside later. "Ryan's always been like this," he sighed. "His mom was the same, spent money like it grew on trees." I tried teaching him value, but it never stuck. His voice was heavy with disappointment, and I felt a pang of guilt. I wanted to fix Ryan, to make him see what he had in his dad, but I was starting to realize some people don't change. One day, my father-in-law asked for my help with something serious. "I'm working on my end-of-life plans," he said, his tone matter-of-fact. "Nothing morbid, just want things in order. Ryan's not reliable. Can you help me sort it out?" I nodded, feeling honored but heavy. We spent hours going over his accounts, his properties, his debts. That's when I learned the truth about his finances, a truth Ryan didn't know. His big community center project had gone bust, and he'd taken out a massive loan, using $500 million of his savings as collateral. If he couldn't repay it, the bank would take it all. He laughed it off, saying he'd planned to start one last project to cover it, but his health was failing. "If I don't make it," he said, "the collateral's gone. Ryan needs to know that." I promised to handle it if the time came, my heart aching at the thought. Ryan's behavior got worse after that. He stopped even pretending to help around the house, leaving the caregiver to do everything. He'd lounge in the living room, buying random gadgets online, a drone, a leather jacket, using his own savings now, but acting like he was untouchable. "Dad's got millions," he'd say, waving me off when I warned him to slow down. I kept my distance, focusing on work and my father-in-law's stories to keep my sanity. I knew something was coming, something big, but I didn't know how soon it would hit. The day my father-in-law passed away, it felt like the world lost a little of its light. He was gone just before his 80th birthday, taken by a sudden heart attack. The house in Atlanta, once filled with his warm laughter and stories, felt hollow. I sat in the living room, staring at the photos on the mantel, him cutting a ribbon at a community center, smiling like he'd just won the lottery. My heart ached, not just for the loss but for the time we'd had, so short but so meaningful. He'd been more than a father-in-law. He'd been a friend, a mentor, someone who saw me for who I was. I was still reeling, barely able to process the grief. When Ryan walked in, his face lit up like he'd just hit the jackpot. "Giselle, we need to talk," he said, his voice dripping with excitement. I looked up, expecting maybe a rare moment of vulnerability. Instead, he held up a stack of papers and grinned. "Let's get divorced." The word hit like a slap. I stared at him, my mind struggling to catch up. "What?" I whispered, my throat tight. He didn't miss a beat. "I checked Dad's account. $500 million, Giselle. I'm set for life. I don't need you anymore. You were just the ATM while I waited for this." My blood ran cold. I'd known Ryan was selfish, but this was a new low. He stood there, waving the divorce papers, gloating about how he'd played me, married me to coast on my savings until his dad's money came through. And the way he talked about his dad like he was just a stepping stone to a fortune made my stomach turn. I thought of all the times his dad had apologized for him, the way he'd hoped Ryan would grow up. Now, here was Ryan, spitting on that hope that I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him feel the weight of his betrayal. My fists clenched so hard my nails dug into my palms. But then, like a whisper, I felt my father-in-law's calm voice in my head. "Stay steady, Giselle." I took a shaky breath and looked Ryan in the eye. "Give me the papers," I said, my voice flat. He smirked, handing them over like he'd already won. I signed them right there, my pen shaking but my resolve firm. "File them yourself," I said, tossing them back. "Send my stuff when you're done." I grabbed my purse and walked out, past the oak trees and the life I'd tried to build, my heart pounding with a mix of rage and something else, relief. As I drove away, a laugh bubbled up inside me, unexpected and sharp. Ryan thought he was about to live like a king, but he had no idea what was coming. That $500 million he was banking on? It wasn't what he thought. I knew the truth, and soon, he'd learn it the hard way. A few days after I left, I was holed up in a hotel near downtown Atlanta, scrolling through condo listings and trying to piece together what my life would look like next. My phone buzzed, and Ryan's name flashed on the screen. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello," I said, keeping my voice neutral. His voice came through like a storm. "Giselle, what the hell did you do?" he shouted, so loud I pulled the phone away from my ear. He was panicking, his words tumbling over each other. I let him rant for a moment, then said, "Calm down, Ryan. Tell me what's going on." He was practically hyperventilating. "I went to the bank to pull money from Dad's account, and they said it's locked. There's $500 million in there, Giselle. What's happening?" I could hear the desperation in his voice, and part of me wanted to laugh, but I kept my cool. "You didn't know, did you?" I said, leaning back against the hotel headboard. "Your dad never told you about his business, because you never cared to ask. That $500 million? It's collateral. You can't touch it." "Collateral?" he sputtered. "What does that even mean?" I took a deep breath, remembering the hours I'd spent with my father-in-law, going over his plans. "Your dad poured everything into that community center in East Atlanta," I said. "He wanted to give back, build something for the city. But it tanked. He borrowed $500 million, using his savings as collateral. When he got sick, he couldn't start another project to pay it off. The bank gave him a 2-year grace period, but that's up now. The money's going to settle his debts. It's gone, Ryan." His voice dropped to a whisper. "You're saying there's nothing? $500 million, and it's just gone?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "There's another account, Ryan, $75,000. That's your inheritance. That's what he left for you to live on." Silence stretched on the other end, and I could almost feel his world collapsing. $75,000, he finally said, his voice breaking. I spent everything I had, Giselle. I thought I'd get millions. I'm broke." I should have felt sorry for him, but all I felt was a quiet vindication. "You spent your money and mine," I said, my voice steady. "You assumed you'd hit the jackpot, but you never even talked to your dad about his plans. You just saw dollar signs." He started to stammer, begging me to help, to pretend the divorce never happened. "Please, Giselle," he said. "You've got savings, a job. I've got nothing. I'm 43, unemployed, with barely enough to get by." I shook my head. "You made your choices, Ryan. You don't get to lean on me anymore. Figure it out." I hung up, my heart racing but lighter than it had been in months. Ryan did follow through with his dad's will, sending me $35,000, half of his inheritance, probably because he thought fighting over it wasn't worth the hassle. I heard through mutual friends that he went back to sales, but the shock of losing his fantasy fortune crushed him. He made mistakes, got chewed out by bosses half his age, and quit after a month. Now he's scraping by as a part-time delivery driver, his savings dwindling with every bad decision. I don't wish him ill, but his troubles aren't mine anymore. As for me, I found a cozy condo in Midtown with a balcony overlooking the Atlanta skyline. I deposited the $35,000 in my savings, not to spend, but as a reminder of my father-in-law's spirit, his drive, his heart, his belief in doing what matters. Every time I check my account and see it there, it's like he's cheering me on, telling me to keep going. I'm back to long days at work, pitching software and closing deals, but now I come home to a place that's mine, filled with my own dreams. I'm not the widow lost in grief anymore, or the wife stuck in a lie. I'm Giselle, and I'm building something new, one step at a time. To everyone who's followed this journey, thank you. You've walked with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and the kind of comeback that makes you feel alive again. If my story hit you, stirred something in your heart, hit that subscribe button and join us. Every tale we tell here is about fighting through the mess, finding your strength, and starting over. Keep carving your own path, and I'll see you at the next chapter.